On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Let's see, the third day of the week, that would be Tuesday. Anybody here get married on a Tuesday? I didn't think so. Me neither. Saturday, August 14th, 1976, which would be the day after a Friday the 13th, which would have been an unlucky day. But we did, however, have a wine issue. So for our wedding, we had decided to go with the more people, less stuff model. And so the guest list got to be 300 people long. And the one thing that we were going to have was a champagne toast. And Patty's dad made a calculation error. He accidentally miscounted what size a glass would be. And as a result, we had champagne for 300 left over. Now that meant that any minor achievement for several years was marked by popping a bottle of champagne. Oh, no cavities at the dentist? Great, let's have champagne. You solved the crossword puzzle in the newspaper? Good, that's a good one. Any minor achievement whatsoever. Same reward, an abundance of wine. Well, none of us who were not married on a Tuesday were married in the time of Jesus in a Jewish society. I want you to stop and think about how to have a wedding back then. A wedding back then wouldn't have happened on a Saturday. That's the Sabbath. And that probably rules out Sunday too, because somebody would have had to work on Saturday on the Sabbath to get ready. So that's not going to happen. And Friday's probably out also because the Sabbath begins at sundown the evening before, so if the party was going to go on into the evening, that's going to be out. So the days are starting to drift away as to what days you're going to have a wedding. But why Tuesday? Well, let me give you a hint. The creation story in Genesis 1 reads, "And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees on the land that bear fruit with seeds in it according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day." Now there's something in there that you might have missed, very subtle. The third day is the only day in the creation story that God says twice that it was good. And for the ancient Hebrews, Tuesday, the third day, was a lucky day. And so to hold your wedding on a Tuesday was the way to go. Avoid that Friday the 13th kind of jinx. Pick the lucky day. So why did the gospel writer put that in the story? In fact, why did the gospel writer put this story in the gospel? And why is it chosen for us today? Because we're in year C in the lectionary, and we will work our way as the year progresses through the Gospel of Luke. And here today we have this random story from John. Well, why does the writer put this in his story? The story in his gospel? Writer of John carefully marks each of his events according to the Jewish calendar. The events in the Gospel of John often take place at the Festival of the Booths or the Festival of the Passover. And marking time with the Jewish calendar as opposed to the Roman calendar, which would have been in force at the time of the writing, was important to the gospel writer. Perhaps John's establishing his credential, because I feel like his gospel almost reads like a lawyer presenting a case. There's a nice prologue. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. There's a good opening argument. And there's going to be an unmistakable conclusion. The end of the gospel reads, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So here's the lawyer's case. We begin, we come to this unmistakable conclusion, and then John right away calls his first witness, John the Baptist. John, tell me who this guy Jesus is. And in the Gospel of John, John the Baptist testifies about Jesus more than anything else he does. Later on, there's other witnesses, but the book immediately jumps into signs, one after the other, case upon case, of laying out the case that Jesus is the Messiah. There's no Christmas in John, no virgin birth, no stable, no shepherds, no Gabriel, no census. Hark, the herald angels don't sing. The mother of Jesus, you might call her Mary. John doesn't. She's never named in the Gospel of John. In fact, she shows up only twice. Right here, this little cameo appearance where she's noted as the mother of Jesus, and she shows up again at the foot of the cross. And that's all that she's in the book. So let me come back to my other question. Why does the writer choose to include this story in the gospel? So I said, John picked and chose among the various signs of Jesus to put in the book. Why this one? How does this stack up against healing leprosy or casting out a demon or raising someone from the dead? At first glance, this doesn't seem quite to stack up like those in terms of life-altering importance. But let me give you a hint as to why this might be here. Listen to words from prophets. From Amos. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when the reaper will be overtaken by the plowman and the planter by the one treading grapes. New wine will drip from the mountains and flow from all the hills. And Hosea. People will dwell again in his shade. They will flourish like the grain. They will blossom like the vine. Israel's fame will be like the wine of Lebanon. And Jeremiah. They will come and shout for joy on the heights of Zion. They will rejoice in the bounty of the Lord, the grain, the new wine, and the olive oil, the young of the flocks and herds. They will be like a well-watered garden, and they will sorrow no more. Wine in abundance is a prophetic sign of the coming of the Messiah. The early readers of John's Gospel, who knew their scriptures, would catch the idea that this man, Jesus, was the source of wine and abundance, and it would become one more critical point in establishing the Christship of this man, Jesus. Jesus begins his ministry with wine, and he will close it with a new covenant sealed in the cup. Think about that in a few minutes when you come to the rail. The fruit of the vine is as nourishing as it gets. And why was the story chosen for today? We're in the season of Epiphany, and Epiphany, if you've been following along, means revealing. This is Jesus being revealed as the Messiah. The beginning of that revealing, the sign of water being turned into wine, the wine that ushers in the Messianic age, the wine that turns a random Tuesday into a lucky day for a bridegroom, much to the relief of the mother of Jesus. So how does this story speak to us today? Well, I thought I'll turn to that ultimate Bible authority, Google, and simply search the phrase water into wine. And the first thing that popped up in my Google must know how old I am, was a clip from an old Art Linkletter show. Many of us around here are old enough to remember that, and Art Linkletter used to interview children, and they would say outrageous things. And he found a little girl, and he said, "What's your favorite Bible story?" And she looks up and she says, "It was when Jesus made water into wine." And Linkletter says, "Yes, that was a miracle." What does the story of Jesus making water into wine tell us? What does it teach us? And she says, "When you run out of wine, get on your knees and pray." Well, I don't think I can be that cute, but I have a couple of ideas about what the lesson says to us today. The first is about abundance. Jesus said, "I come that you have life and have it abundantly." And abundance means both quality and quantity. And the chief steward certainly testified to the quality of the wine. It's the highest quality. And quantity? Well, just how much is 150 gallons of wine? I'm splitting that difference between 20 and 30 at 25, and 625 says 150 gallons of wine. It would be, by my calculations, 4,800 4-ounce glasses. It would be 756 750 milliliter bottles. And of our little half-ounce communion cups, it would make 38,400 of those cups. Shannon, can you imagine filling all those cups? Oh, my heavens. Life with Jesus is about abundance. Abundant life in both quality and quantity. Abundance of wine that makes champagne for 300 look like a puddle. And my second thought is about miracles. When Jesus performs a miracle, he does so with common substances and common people. Today, we read about stone jars and water. We read about servants who were given a significant task. I don't know if you thought about it, but 150 gallons of water just doesn't appear out of nowhere. Nobody could holler, hey, I'm here, turn on the hose over there, like guy says, fill these jars. Somebody made a lot of trips to the well. And who knows where the well was? 150 gallons just doesn't show up in a minute or two. This was work. So I'm going to offer up the idea that it's not necessary to violate the laws of physics to make a miracle. Miracles happen with common substances and common people. So when Linda can take ordinary tubes of metal and mechanical bellows and make beautiful music happen, that's a miracle. When our members take scraps of fabric and bits of thread and tie them together and make a quilt that's going to comfort a frightened child, that's a miracle. When we donate food, one item at a time, and feed hungry families, that's a miracle. As we read today in 1 Corinthians, we all have different gifts. We all have our different ways of making miracles. They all come from the same Spirit. And as the intro to the lesson said, none of us are superior to any of the others in terms of our gifts. So the quilters aren't superior to the musicians, and the musicians aren't superior to the ushers, and the ushers aren't superior to the tech crews. Sorry, Paul. None of us are superior to anybody else. The men aren't superior to the women, now even in the Constitution of the United States. We're but common folk, but we make miracles. Maybe we don't turn water into wine, but we produce life-saving and life-altering miracles just the same. And when we, you and me, add even the slightest amount of joy to the life of someone else, that's a miracle. And I give thanks to God for the opportunity to make miracles alongside each of you, and encourage you this morning to keep on keeping on making miracles, because God loves you. Amen.